in Europe. But in the United States, it was something completely different, because there the price, increased price in dollars had to be paid by the population themselves, you know. And at that time, there was so many that had such a small limit in their economy. So the increased price of oil, the increased price of food and everything meant that a certain amount of people came over the limit, and they couldn't pay for their loans and so on. And suddenly there was started to be a lot of houses available that no one could buy. And then, of course, the stupid system they have for their loans and so on is, of course, to blame. But the triggering factor, I think, was the high oil price.
Uma segunda pergunta para o professor Aleklett, de novo, da Isaura. Ela pergunta quantos anos vão ser necessários para o petróleo acabar, e se não houverem novas descobertas, e se não forem usados os biocombustíveis. E ela ainda faz uma segunda provocação ao senhor, se, na sua opinião, os árabes ainda vão ser grandes produtores de biocombustíveis.
Well, let's start with the last question about where should the power be in the future. And I would say that the power in the future will be in countries that are self-supporting of energy and food. And today I can only see two big countries in the world that will face into that, and that is Russia and that is Brazil. So the other countries will be dependent on importing energy or importing food. Saudi Arabia, Middle East, they must import food for the future. They cannot produce the food they need for the people. So that's it's not them. What was the first question, by the way?
The first question quantos anos vão ser necessários para faltar petróleo? Ela pergunta assim, quantos anos vai faltar petróleo para o consumo até 2030?
Well, the forecast we made to 2030 is what we think is reality. And it's the fact is that you cannot take out as much oil as you like from an oil field. It's like having a bank account with $1 million, and you can only withdraw $7 million or 7% of your bank account every year. How rich are you? Are you a millionaire, or are you just a human, normal person? And see, this is the thing that the agency are not counting with. And I think I saw what the U.S. Energy Information Administration put out just this week in your graph. And gee, I mean, poor America, if they should believe in them.
Mais alguma pergunta? Bom, então eu, em nome do Ethanol Summit 2009, eu queria agradecer a presença aqui dos nossos ilustres e brilhantes palestrantes. E a todos.
Do we have more time?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we have to 4 o'clock, and I mean, why should we waste this time? Now I can start to discuss.
Okay.
We are discussing the future of the world, and a very important future. And it's a mixture of many things that will drive the future. The political driving force for the moment is the climate change issue. And something that I didn't mention in my speech was that the peak oil means that none of the IPCC emission scenarios when it comes to oil can happen. There will never be so much carbon dioxide emission from oil as they think it should be. So in principle, one can say the volume of carbon dioxide coming out from oil will not affect the climate of the globe the way people are saying today. The other thing is that the next component when it comes to climate change, and that is natural gas. And the natural gas forecast that IPCC has in their scenarios, their carbon dioxide emission scenarios from 2000 is even more crazy than the oil scenarios. So none of the scenarios they predict for emission of carbon dioxide from natural gas can happen. So oil and natural gas for the climate is not a problem. With this, I don't say that we don't have a climate change, because we see that there is a change in the climate, but the thing for the future is that we should look into other things. So then it comes about coal, and the coal in the future. And I must say that even most of the scenarios that they predict for coal is absolutely not possible at all. And this has to do with the depletion factor that I mentioned before, because you cannot withdraw so much coal per year as they have in their scenarios. So all of these things has to be thought about. And the problem is what you touched here, dear friend Bob, at the end. The problem for the world is that too many people has too little energy to use for the future. And what you should remember is that when you had lunch today, I think you probably thought you had a lot of nice food to eat. But, dear friends, you were just eating oil. Because you need oil to produce all that food. The food energy content is normally calculated in calories, kilocalories. So if you take 1,000 units of that, the farmer needs 1,600 units of oil to produce that 1,000 units of food just to eat. And especially in the United States and Europe, the industry that finally, and you bring in the food around and to the table, means that it's 7 times as much oil and natural gas that is needed than the energy content in the food. So the problem for the future is how should we get enough food for the people when they have a decline in oil and natural gas? And people like to live without starving. Too many people are starving today, and this is the thing that we really should be working with and try to find a way how to make agriculture, industry, and other independent of fossil fuel. That is, I think, the key question for the future, how to make production of food fossil-free.
Obrigado pelas suas. Também passaria agora a palavra ao Michael McAdams.
I wanted to leave one more comment in the room. The whole discussion about biofuels has been a bit of a roller coaster ride. And it's been very interesting to see the evolution in Washington, D.C. from policymakers on both sides of the aisle in terms of how they view the feedstock component moving forward. So one of the things I wanted to just take a minute and is talk about what might be an appropriate feedstock policy for governments, and what components do we need to be aware of in which the markets will react to. Well, unfortunately in Washington, D.C., we have a tendency to compartmentalize things, and in the minds of most people in Washington, D.C., we did biofuels in 2007. And so this year, what we're going to do is electricity. But what some politicians don't realize is the feedstock that they're going to make the biofuels out of, this year we're going to put tax provisions in and requirements in so that we're going to now make electricity out of the same feedstock we were going to make out of the biofuels. So there's got to be some effort to figure out what is the highest value of these various feedstocks moving forward. That's point one. The second point I want to leave you is a bit in the weeds. But the second point I want to leave you is that these wonderful technologies that I'm privileged to represent are evolving. There are a whole range of different technologies in a race to see who's going to get there first and how they're going to, arrive into the commercial marketplace. And unfortunately, give you an example, a specific example. One of the things in the solicitation program for that $800 million was because of a food versus fuel fight that started last spring in Washington, they eliminated sugar as a potential feedstock for any technology bidding on the $800 million. Now, we were lucky enough as the Advanced Biofuels Association with our members to convince the Obama administration that it really didn't make any sense to say to a whole range of sugar-based fermentation technologies or sugar-based catalyst technologies that they couldn't bid on the money to try to develop their technology at the same time the administration was trying to move forward, quote, cellulosic technologies. And so, again, this is a very complicated area. The doctors raised a lot of very interesting philosophic overarching points. And as we get into these weeds, we need to be very careful about how we construct this policy so that we don't wipe out 70% of the venture technologies before they even get a shot because someone is trying to politically react in the moment. So what I've tried to suggest to the U.S. government in the last 4 months is slow down a little bit. Let's let this evolve. Let's see how these markets emerge. Let's see what impact the renewable fuel standard will have on bringing these fuels to market. And then let's make some adjustments down the road instead of having politicians, and I will not name names, stand up and say, I have the answer today, and the answer is X. As the colleague said down the table here, the U.S. government has a tremendous track record of picking the wrong technology. And so I want to thank you again for being here, and I want to thank you, my panelists, for being with them. Thank you.
Rob Smith.
It's hard to say anything that hasn't already been said from this panel, but I think Kjell brought up a great point. It's how do we provide for the planetary the population growth that we see, and food really is a key issue. Economic growth is a key issue, and to whatever the energy solution is, as I said, clearly biofuels and the advanced biofuels in particular, sugar are all part of the solution. We have to take those to a couple of scales, order of magnitude above what they are now on a global basis. But how do we do that in a world that's short water? And no matter how aggressively we tackle CO2, we have to also be adapting because we're going to be short water in many of these same places that are short energy. So people in Africa, people in Australia, many of the island areas are going to be short energy, water, and food, and that leads to a whole array of other potential crises. So, as I said in closing, I think one of the keys is how can we replicate the success that Brazil has had in other parts of the world. The whole supply chain, the flexibility that you have, the options that you have as energy consumers to switch back and forth between selected fuels, and I'm confident that in the years to come there'll be other fuels added to the mix. It could be compressed natural gas, it could be hydrogen, it could be fuel cells, it could be battery technology. We'll have a whole array of additional options as each of these technologies has its development curve and comes to market. And so I think the unique blend of policy, of environmental awareness and sustainable vision that Brazil had is what we need to take certainly to the U.S. and many other parts of the world so we stop talking about problems and implement